Hello friends and welcome back to the channel where I am back as late as I've ever been with war rewards. I've been so busy with real life and work stuff, and we were waiting for the war rewards and then also the compensation rewards because they messed up the rankings with that canceled war this season. So we're going to skip the usual stuff, go right into these 7-star crystal openings. I have 5 7-stars to open today, and on top of everything else, I have been working through some technical difficulties getting my new phone hooked up to OBS, so I actually had to pre-record my crystal openings here. So I already know what I'm getting out of these, but you don't, and that's why we're here. So first 7-star from War Rewards is going to be getting us a first-time dupe on Sorcerer Supreme. Actually pretty happy with that one. I like Sorcerer a lot. Very powerful, very good champion, a lot of utility in that kit. And I really like the dupe because it allows her to be useful on nodes that reduce her ability accuracy, which is always great. And makes her also an effective domino counter for such a situation as well. Alright, second 7-star is getting us more SIGs on Venom. This is the only pull in this batch here that I wasn't like crazy thrilled about. I think he's SIG 80 now, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 80. And, Venom SIG is fine. Like, 20 is really all you need. The increased chance for a third buff is, it's fine. But, the fights that I use him for are usually over before it matters regardless, so. Alright, and third crystal of this first batch here is a first-time dupe on Odin. I was really, really happy about this one. I've been wanting the dupe on Odin for quite a while. He is such a tanky champion. I think I might have to rank him up now, now that he's duped, so. So then a few days passed between the Alliance War rewards and then this Alliance Wars compensation, which was the difference in rewards between where you landed and where you're supposed to land after they adjusted for that canceled war. That canceled war really messed a lot of things up this season, so hopefully we don't have another thing like that for a while. So in that time frame, I was able to scrape together enough shards for another 7-star, plus we get a fully formed one from the compensation. So here we go, 7-star crystals, number 4 and 5, and again, this is all still pre-recorded. I see Kushal on the reel there. I was really hoping I would get her. I don't. Spoiler alert. I get another 26 on Atuma, which I am happy about. Atuma does want a higher signature ability, and I think he's at 60 now, which is a pretty good sweet spot for him. I'm not sure I'm going to put more SIGs into him at this point, but definitely a consideration for the future. Really happy with 20 extra SIGs, though. And then this last 7-star, I recall not being the greatest, but not also the worst either. Another 26 on Deathstrike. I use Deathstrike a lot. I really like her. Think she's fine kind of where she is. Don't really think she needs additional signature levels. But again, that also puts her at 60. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into the season summary. So SSX managed to sneak in despite our best efforts otherwise. We managed to finish in the master bracket at rank 18. Yeah, it was kind of it was difficult to predict where we were going to land as we kind of played through the season because the leaderboards were all messed up from that canceled war. We kept getting really difficult matches where a lot of other Masters Alliances were getting like really easy matches, and it was really hard to predict where everybody was going to land. So getting Masters again after that season, pretty happy with that for sure. 52 kills for me, about average for a season. 2 deaths, unfortunately, also becoming about average for me. And then our record on the season finished at 6 and 5. So moving on, let's take a look at my fight summary for the season. Greens, of course, are solos, and we've got 2 yellow blemishes there in Wars 7 and 9. Both of my deaths this season came against Tactic Defenders, and both of them were using Viv Vision, who I got a lot of fights with this season, so I was pretty pleased about that. Not too pleased with the deaths, but that's going to happen. Now, in terms of my favorite fight, I'm honestly not sure I have one this season, because if you notice from these fights listed here, I'm not sure you can really tell without reading through all of them, but a lot of them were like, the same matchups on the same path, a lot of 4B Dust, a lot of Null on 4B. I took a man thing with right back at it like 3 or 4 times. We took Enchantress Boss a couple times, so a lot of these are just repeats. But I would say that my proudest fight of the season was probably the last time that I took that Man-Thing mini-boss, which I think, looking at this real quick, was War 9 with Viv. And that was a fight that I managed to get a 0 damage solo of. And if you've watched my channel at all, you've watched me play Viv, I always say the goal with a Viv fight with me is to finish the fight with a yellow bar by taking not even a single blocked hit. And we managed to do that in several fights this season, but that Man-Thing Mini is definitely the most challenging one of the fights that I took with her. I also want to give an honorable mention, of course, to the Domino fight in War Number 7 there. Always love embarrassing Domino, and that was a masochism fight, if I remember correctly, and Viv just absolutely demolished her on that node. So similarly, when we're talking about my least favorite fight, it's really hard to choose one because, again, a lot of these are just the same fights over and over again. I will say that the Wiccan fight in War 1 against Salty, we were kind of forced into like a less than optimal matchup with Deathless Vision. He worked fine for the fight, but he's not Incinerate immune, so you really kind of had to play the fight a specific way in order to avoid melting from the Incinerate damage. Alright, moving on, let's take a look at my most assigned attackers for this season, and surprise, surprise, number 1 spot belongs to my favorite champ Void, and it should even be less surprising to you when I tell you that I did about half of the planning for our battle group this season. So with William moving on to TCN for the time being, the only planners left in the battle group are myself and DLL. And our schedules don't exactly match up, so I would usually log on in the evening after I was done with work, done with putting the kids to bed, and do half the plan, a rough draft or so, and then he and I would get together later when he was off work and done with dinner and that, and then we would work together to finish off the plan. So I was, heavily involved in every single plan this season. So, again, not surprising that I would try and assign myself Void, who was a tactic attacker this season, as much as possible. Now, that being said, Void only took the lead at the last minute, and Viv was leading for pretty much the whole season. And then in War 12, it just made sense to give myself, a bunch of Void fights, and actually passed a few off to somebody else just for time's sake. So he would have had an even bigger lead, but that came at the last second. So I think Viv still going to find her way into the thumbnail for this season, just to give her a bit of recognition, because I was really, really excited to be using her. She was a tactic attacker this season, a really good tactic attacker, despite only being available as a 6-star. Really good for the Masochism node on 1A, really good for Nullify nodes like 1B, for Nullify champs like Maw and Man-Thing. She could get the tactic up without relying on debuffs, so any debuff immune node like that right back at it mini we talked about earlier, really, really good for. And then moving on at number 3, Omega Sentinel with 10 fights. I don't think we saw her banned a single time this season, which I found a little bit surprising. We saw a lot of Deathstrike bans and a lot of Ironheart bans, and I am going to take a little bit of credit for the latter, valid or not, just because so many people poo-poo her, but she was one of the best tactic attackers these past 2 seasons. Ironheart, of course, coming in at number 4, only 3 Ironheart fights, and again, she was banned in almost every war, I think, if memory serves. We took a bunch of random skill defenders this season with Negasonic, and then we finally got our Wiccan duped, which I talked about in several videos this past season. So we don't have to take a 6-star Carl in to that 4B null fight. We can use Wiccan, and it is much, much easier with a duped Wiccan than it is with a Carl. And then some stragglers at the bottom of the list here. Chavez, I think we took an Adam Warlock with, maybe one of those Gores on 8B. Vision we used for that Wiccan fight, and then we were able to sneak in a single Howard the Duck assignment for me this season. All of the Howard fights this past season went to Nagase. I think we assigned him to Nagase probably 40, maybe 50 times, and he was just taking some really, really silly stuff with Howard in War this past season. I think he put out a video with it maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, taking this ridiculous debuff immune Sasquatch with it. He was taking power snack nodes with him, just some crazy fights. But I was glad I was able to sneak in at least one Howard fight. I think it was a Killmonger, which we were able to armor break really easily. And then rounding off the end of the list, we got Photon and Venom. Quickly, let's take a look at the list of banned attackers from this past season. Luke Cage coming in at number 1, banned in 11 out of 12 wars, and he will find himself blacklisted for us in the next season, which is a bit of a bummer because he is tactic once again and is a pretty good tactic attacker for that matter. But on the other hand, we get Silk on the whitelist, so that kind of makes up for that. Spider-Man 2099 coming at number 2, banned in 10 out of 12 wars for us, did not find his way onto the blacklist, however, And that is maybe even more of a bummer because he is once again a really good attacker for next 2 seasons. Not going to be tactic, but good enough that he will probably be banned in every war next season, and then will find himself blacklisted for season 55. So Spider-Man 2099 enjoyers, we have a few of them in the Alliance. Probably not going to get much use out of him until season 56, unfortunately. Professor X banned quite a bit. That's really just to stop him. He is a huge nuke with powerbacks in Alliance War, especially as people haven't still yet figured out how to fight Enchantress properly. They're still banning Professor X. Ironheart banned quite a bit, as we talked about earlier. And then the other blacklisted member for next season is Lady Deathstrike, only banned in less than half the wars for us, but I think in Tier 2 and maybe some of Tier 3 she was banned much more heavily. Bunch of stragglers here. Joe Fixit, Void found themselves banned a few times. Photon was banned by a lot of like high tier alliances. I think GT bans Photon. Not a tactic attacker, but really strong regardless. And then Ghost was banned for us. That was really random. Leader, we had a random leader banned at the end of the season. And then Ultron and Viv each got 1 ban. The NA there, by the way, is from the canceled war. I didn't remove it from the graphic because I forgot. So, all right, moving on. Let's talk about my loyalty expenses and income for the season. Starting at the top, my expenses this season were pretty low. And overall, I really felt like I had a very efficient season with regard to item usage. Not a lot of potions this season, and even in the wars that I died in with Viv, healing her up doesn't take a lot because her health pool is very small, so that kind of kept my potion usage down over the course of the season. In addition, my advanced power boost also very low compared to previous seasons. Part of that is Ironheart being banned, which means I wasn't taking 4B dust every single war, which I think requires an advanced power boost with Ironheart to get it down perfectly. Barely any power back boosts this season, only the one. A bunch of special boosts just for additional efficiency, but again, overall expenses very low this season. Similarly, my income was also low this season. We gained about 250,000 loyalty over the course of the season, and when I considered why my expenses were low and my income was also low, it really comes down to that we didn't win very many wars this season. We went 6-5 officially. We didn't participate at all in that canceled war, so that was another effective loss. And when you don't win many wars, you don't really gain that much loyalty. Now, that being said, any season in which you gain a positive amount of loyalty is a good one, and so I'm definitely happy with that result. And then at the bottom there, units spent, a bunch of units spent on energy refills. That's expected. That's not really a big deal. We didn't end up buying the potion bundle this season. I haven't bought it in a few seasons, honestly. And then the only other units that I spent that I didn't explicitly keep track of here were mastery swaps. And over the course of a season, I typically spend units swapping back and forth between like my ouchie setup, which I use for arena grinding, and then my normal mastery setup, which I use for war fights. And I never really keep track of it here. And the only reason I'm talking about it is that I did have to spend more units above and beyond what is normal for me, turning on and off the Resonate Mastery this season, especially for those masochism fights, or fight singular, on path 1A. You really don't want to be triggering the node with the Resonate, the weakness debuff from Resonate. So I did turn that mastery off and then turn it back on for other fights. But other than that, unit expenditures pretty low this season. Next up, as I like to do in all of these review videos, I do want to spend a quick moment giving a huge shout out to all of the officers and planners in SSX, and a thank you to all of them for making this such a great place to play. Specifically, one of my best friends in the game and my partner in crime in planning, Mr. DLL, who I mentioned earlier is the other planner in BG3. We pair really well together when it comes to planning, I think. We have a lot of the same views and approaches on planning and pathing and whatnot. Not enough that we are just each other's yes man. Do like to challenge each other from time to time, but I really do think that we make it a good team when it comes to planning. And I am very appreciative and thankful for having him available. Just a wealth of knowledge. And so DLL, if you're watching this, thanks a lot, bud. Really, really appreciate you. Last but far from least, I do want to give a special shout out and a thank you to my good friend Nick, who moved on from SSX this offseason to go play with some friends over in 4Loki. And if there's one place that I would direct people to go if they leave us, it would be 4Loki for sure. Hopefully he'll be back in a couple seasons. But, Nick has grown into one of my other best friends in the game. He was here in SSX from the moment I arrived a couple years ago, whenever it was. And he's just kind of been a mainstay in the Alliance. And I can't really overstate how important his presence was for me as a player and now as a planner in this Alliance. Just so much influence he's had on me. He and I approach the game very differently. I think I've talked about that in prior war review videos. He is much more a Battlegrounds player. I prefer like solo content, but beyond that, even our approach to champions remains very different. And I really, more than anything, have appreciated being challenged on my ideas, my notions about champions from him. So yeah, Nick, if you're watching this, dude, just thank you so much for everything you've done for me, for SSX. Good luck over in 4Loki, and your ass better be back here in a couple seasons or we're going to hunt you down. All right, folks, that's going to do it for another season of Alliance War. Hope you enjoyed the war videos this season. I am not entirely sure what my plan is going to be for this next season. SSX is taking season 54 mostly casual, so maybe I'll record the fights anyways and upload the ones that seem interesting. I'm not sure it's going to be worth it to upload like an entire season's worth of videos, but we'll see we'll see how it goes. I'll kind of play it by ear. So if you enjoyed this, please remember to hit that like button, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next season.